Thanks, everyone, for joining us at the Project Censored radio show. We're very honored to invite back on the program Dr. Khalil Khalidy, who's an orthopedic doctor in Deir al-Balah, Gaza. Khalil, thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you for having me again. It's always an honor.
Well, we can debate this, but the honor is ours. But I want.
Mutual indeed. That's what we can say.
There we go. We will agree with that. So I wanted to start off. We were talking off air before we started recording the quote unquote ceasefire. How are things now that the current phase 1 is over? And what would you say the situation is like right now since the quote unquote ceasefire?
Well, since the start of the quote unquote ceasefire, which is a very, like from the get-go, from the beginning, we were very aware, and we had warned everybody about what is about to happen. Because from the get-go, the principles and the points and the promises that were made were very fragile and can be breached at any moment. And from the get-go, they were very vocal and they were very clear that they don't want the ceasefire to take place and be permanent, quote unquote. So it's expected what had happened, and the way they pushed it and the way they found excuses to breach it and blame us for preaching it. The things that changed, for once, there's it's not that there's the bombings. There is less bombings. There is less attacks, less casualties. The food situation, it improved for a few days, and we call it the social media and news few days. So just to show the people that there are, okay, we got them aid, we got them food, we allowed things to get in and then shut down. And as of now, it's been like 5 days so far with nothing entering in from the borders whatsoever. So we are dependent on what we have stacked up or what we have saved or what we have gotten from these days, which is a very similar situation to what had been happening throughout this genocide, previous genocides. Another aspect is that they promised to get injured people out for medical treatment and medical attention, in which they got few, like very few, less than, let's say less than 200 people got out of thousands that were promised. The border is still closed. There is not that much of an absolute freedom between traveling between the north and the south. Yes, people go to the north and go back to the south, but not as free as it's painted on the social media and in the news, because you have to walk on foot or take an open cart or an open, like we call them TikTok, not TikToks, we call them tuk-tuks. Tuk-tuks, which is a cart pulled on a motorcycle. And there is the traditional cart, which is pulled by a donkey or pulled by a horse. Is something obviously very exposed to what's being carried on, what's being pulled on. And it takes a lot of time to move from point A to point B, which is the Netzarim corridor, which starts from the hill of Nweri, we call it, which is on the beach, to the Warren Nabil Sea, which is a crossroad at the start of Gaza City, around the place that the flower massacre happened. So people will walk approximately or go on these carts for approximately 8 kilometers. And this makes things difficult because you cannot carry a lot of luggage, you cannot carry a lot of supplies, you cannot carry your belongings, you cannot carry materials to save or try to fix things up in the north, which is their plan, to make things very restricted and very hard. And on the other side, on the east road, which is Salahuddin Road, they have their own checkpoints to scan the cars and scan the vehicles. And this scanning, it takes approximately 3 to 4 hours for a vehicle to go through, because the waiting line is very, very, very long. So yes, we got back to the north, but going back and forth from the north is very challenging and very difficult, which is situation is very reminiscent to what's been happening in the West Bank, by the way. The West Bank is very used to this, to travel from village to its like center city of the district or something like this. It takes hours to travel around a city to another city. It might take days instead of like 15 minutes or 20 minutes travel by car. Um, that's about like traveling, the situation with the patients, the food situation, of course, many supplies necessary for reconstruction and saving and fixing things. Not, I'm not talking about rebuilding or reestablishing an institute or a building or a facility, but just fixing it. Like getting the clock pipes or getting pipes or getting like wires, getting cement to melt the walls and such and such. No, it's still forbidden. We cannot have any of this. So what we resort to is use what we had. What we had is mostly tin scraps, wood that's been like thrown from previous furniture, um, whatever nails we can find or pull from the destroyed furniture. And we repurpose it into windows, into quote unquote walls, and we make do. I will send you a clip of what our house and my relative's house has been like looking like, and how we changed it into some sort of like livable condition, because it's better than being in the streets or on the streets in a tent. When you have a wall, when you have a ceiling, it's way safer, way warmer than what had been happened. And we've seen what happened with people in the tents and how the wind blew them away in the latest storm. And so, yeah, that's in general what's going on.
Yeah, thank you for that. And listeners should also be aware that there are American soldiers who are working the checkpoints between the North and the South.
Yeah, we see, we see them, and um, I'm laughing because they expected us to some sort of like be intimidated or worried about them, like from them or something like this. And we always see our like young youth teenagers, they are very rebellious, very out there, and they make fun of them all the time. They go with this typical stereotype of what's an American like. They tell them like, "Oh, hey, how do you?" and all of that. And they look at us, and they look at us as like, "Oh, what are they like? Do they think or Americans do this?" And I'm like, and internally, inside of me, I'm like, "Yes, taste this. Like, have a taste of your own medicine of like generalizing and stereotyping someone." Like,
Ah, I love that. I'm so glad to hear it. It's a little bit of sugar in a bitter world. Well, I'm also curious because you're a doctor, and of course, the last time we spoke really in the midst of the genocide, you shared a lot of information about the daily horrors that you experienced. How has the medical situation shifted, in terms of what like a regular shift for you? Regular, what a ridiculous word. What a day might look like for you, and do you have any more access to any more supplies, medically speaking?
well, when it comes to the medical situation, regards to supplies, no, we don't have more access to more supplies, but because there are less injuries, uh, there are more supplies. So the supplies that are provided are more enough to deal with what we have right now than it was more, because we used to have like 200, 300 people coming in, like coming into the hospital needing medical attention, not just any medical attention, but medical attention, like intensive care medical attention. And they drain the resources so fast. So we can deal better in a better situation, But what we are dealing with right now is the aftermath of what happened for 16 months, because most of the cases, our direct attention and all of our energy was pouring towards saving as many people as we can, like keeping them alive as much as we can and in the best condition we could. And obviously, to go back to their lives, they need like rehabilitation. They need more surgeries when it comes to reconstruction, when it comes to plastic surgery, when it comes to a lot of like tweaking and like making someone in their actual best condition to be integrated back into society. And that we are facing a lot of problems with. And we are dealing with the heavy weight of that, because most of the time we would, after, like, for example, if we have someone severely, like having their limb severely crushed, we would like apply an fixation to their limb to save their limb from not being amputated as much as we can. But after that, their fracture is very, very comminuted and very, very brittle to the point they need reconstructive surgery. And we don't have much of the like the equipment and the medication needed to perform these surgeries. Plastic surgery is very, very in demand right now, obviously, because of what we've seen from horrors. And it's very important, especially for the young and the youth, which like form the majority, as well as the women. Um, as obvious as it is, like a woman image is very, very affecting of her psyche and her self-confidence and her self-awareness more than it is for a man, although it's important as well. Um, so yes, we are dealing with the aftermath of that, as well as trying to deal with the pressure to close off the field hospitals and close off the medical missions coming in, because they are no longer urgent, quote unquote. Because these field hospitals and these mobile clinics and these medical missions were focused on saving lives and providing urgent surgeries and urgent care, rather than going to the reconstructive route and going into the complementary route and they have a really habitational route. There are some efforts to shift towards that, but till now, there are no clear instructions into doing so. So we feel stuck. Like we don't have much work to work with, but we don't have the facility to do that other work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And when you say clinics and field hospitals and things, are there any outside doctors or medical staff that are allowed in, or are these all Palestinian and doctors and medical staff who are living in Gaza and from Gaza?
The majority are people from Gaza, who are medical personnel and medical experts and medical specialists who are very capable of doing all of this that I've listed prior. And they have the skill, they have the training, they have the capacity, but they don't have the materials or the facilities to perform in them. And yes, there have been like from abroad medical personnel and healthcare workers to come in and participate with us, but they face the same problem. It's like, for example, there will be in a medical mission a plastic surgeon in coming in and be like, I'm able to do so, so I want to help. And we're like, yes, we have this doctor as well, our colleague, who is like, sometimes it will be a coincidence in a way that they studied or they trained in the same educational facility or in the same college or in the same training hospital, and they know of each other already. But we're like, okay, why now? What? Like, what can I do? I think, okay, I have a tea, like I have a sip of tea with us, for example.
So the outside doctor, because I mean, forgive my ignorance or my naivete, but the doctors or the clinics that come in from the outside are not allowed to bring anything with them. They can only bring their own body
Not much.
expertise.
Yeah, not much. Like when it comes to, like, for example, when it comes to like from an orthopedic point of view, to come in with kits like an X-Fix kit, or coming in with prosthetic limbs, or coming in with drills, or some sort of advanced equipment to perform advanced surgery, they are very, very restricted in that, and they are very, very limited in doing so. So they might bring, like, for example, one limb or one kit with them as like their quote unquote personal kit, or a few medications in their handbags, not as in enter a huge lorry of things. So it restricts their mission a lot in what they can offer. But what we have like benefited from these people coming in is that a lot of them he came here not only to provide us with medical attention, like medical help, and to assist us. They came in with the will to listen and with the will to experience for themselves. And uh, many of them played a crucial role in being a witness. Because it's obvious that our word and our testimonies are not very well received in many communities. And to have someone from them, an insider, coming in and telling them what we are trying to tell them, would have some effect and would wake many people up. So yes, that's the rule that we are more, sorry, that's the role that we are most like happy or glad that they were able to come in. Peter.
Yeah, and I want to talk a little bit about that, but you shared with me a video a while ago that showed some doctors from the so-called West talking about how doctors in Gaza are the most capable doctors that they've ever seen, because you basically have to do everything with nothing. And so certainly not that you need an extra set of hands, but some drills and some supplies would obviously be nice. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you just said, which is that, you keep shouting these things from the rooftops that are left in Gaza, but people don't listen. And this kind of ties into some off-air conversations that we've had, and some of this is also inspired by Mohammed El-Kurd's recent book, Perfect Victims. But I wanted to start by talking about this something that we talk a lot about on the Project Censored Show, which is propaganda and the distraction of it, and using like these absurdist claims and language that is the only objective is clearly just to muddy the waters of colonialist violence. So you spend so much time and energy trying to disprove things like Palestinians use children as human shields, and Hamas is building tunnels under hospitals or whatever, and Palestinians are reading Mein Kampf or whatever the hell else. And it's fluff. It's very dangerous fluff. But the sole reason for it is to suggest that Palestinians deserve whatever happens to them. And it's, of course, the Israelis in Israel that's the victim. And you can't get beyond that fluff, that I can't say it on air, but that absolutely ridiculous language, because you get stuck at the very outset with the, do you condemn Hamas? That kind of BS. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about these dangerous distractions, and what is lost when you try to engage with these absurdities. Like what gets lost when we even try to convince people that this illogic is illogical?
So yes, I agree 100%. What's the problem is that it's obviously like a long history of a lot of situations and a lot of things that been going on and a lot of things that happened. This history doesn't like extend to only 70, um, yeah, so 76, yeah, 76 years only, but way more than that. And hypothetically speaking, if it started 76 years ago, 76, like it's almost 3 generations now. So there is a lot of things that happened, obviously, on both sides. There is right, justifiable, and there is wrong, unjustifiable, and it's all in a blender right now. It's a mixed max. And their situation is, or their tactic is to do so, is to make things very blurry and, as you said, muddy the water in a way of cornering all the Palestinians into the position of defending their existence or defending their presence rather than condemning, rather than holding them accountable, rather than having an actual discussion of what had happened. Like, they don't make you, or they don't give you the opportunity to even discuss what was done. You are stuck into the position of defending why you are who you are. Well said, they are being so unapologetic about what goes on. And the minute you call them out, they immediately turn you around into that same position of defending yourself. And because it's been very like globalized and turned into a worldwide phenomena of like, it's not only the Palestinians, but we are, although Palestinians are like mostly, like Palestinians have, they are Muslims, they are Christians, they are Jews, they are of many, many religions and many, many ethnicities and many, many like racial background throughout the history. We are we are the first ever intercultural society in recorded in history, ever. It's like Deir Shalom, it's the Beit Salam, whatever you want to call it. This piece of land was the first intercultural society ever, and multi-ethnic, multicultural, multi-religious land throughout history. So but we are framed as majorly Muslim, which we are majorly Muslim. And guess what? Who are the people who have this stigma of being like the aggressive, and as well as we are majorly speaking Arabic? Yes, we have people who speak Kurd. Yes, we have people who speak ancient Hebrew, which are the Samiyin. But we are majorly speaking Arabic. We are from the Middle East, Arabs, Mediterraneans, people of the Middle East, Muslims. Put them in a blender, they are all being stigmatized and they are all being cornered. So with what, even if you try to like escape the like trap box of being a Palestinian, you are still considered an Arab. You are still considered a Muslim. So they corner you into a position of trying to defend your existence and who you are, to the point that you cannot call them out. And I will send you a very interesting video of one of the lectures done by a Zionist professor or a Zionist doctor at a university, telling people, or telling the Zionists or the young Jews Zionists in America about their job in defending Israel and the existence of Israel. And she blatantly calls out this tactic of, okay, you are like, we in Israel are fighting our fight to take over the land. Your job is to shift the attention away from what we do. And she says it very clearly. She's like, if someone tries to call Israel for killing or ethnically cleansing people, tell them, oh, look at the map. Israel is very small. Like, people cannot barely notice it. Why are you so concerned about this map? The whole problems about like with this world and the whole wars and the whole hunger, and you are concerned with the Israel. And she blatantly says so, and you notice it all the time in the whole thing. And she even calls out for the abuse of the victim card of the Holocaust. She's so it's being taught to them how to, uh, I believe it's called the 3Ds, which is like deny, deflect, deny, deviate, and deflect, in which they handle every topic. And when you are like, when you develop some sort of awareness or some sort of understanding of that's their tactic, you can counter it. You can call it out from the beginning and put them in the position of defending that tactic rather than them cornering you. And I really found it helpful, especially in conversations online or conversations with people abroad about what they are doing, like the people who are trying to justify. So when they start with what you have like said, like condemn what happened in the 7, they start this conversation and you try, yes, what happened in the 7? What about Hannibal directive? What about that? Like, what about the rumors that have been debunked about the beheaded babies? What about the alleged rape that didn't even happen? Because they attack you with the notion or with the perceived idea that these are unarguable, unnegotiable facts, that they are barbarians, they committed atrocities, they did everything, they destroyed everything, and yes, you are to blame, you are accountable for it. No, number one, we did nothing about it. Like, we had no choice about it. We are not like, these are 2.2 million people. You cannot blame them for arguably what a small group has done. And to see all of the reports and all of the testimonies coming from them, like from their newspapers, from their news articles, from their news websites, calling out Hannibal Directive, calling out like the fraudulent claims and the fraudulent lies, they don't even mention so, because it, like, I don't know, but if we go back to history, it's very reminiscent of what happened with the Germans and the Holocaust, in which is what it was called anti-German talk or anti-German propaganda whenever they would try to call them out for what happened with the Holocaust. So yes, they try to corner you into that position, and to the point that you cannot defend your existence. And that accumulated throughout generations and throughout the years, to the point that we even forgot where it started, or many of us forgot how it started and how it happened. They quote the Bible, they quote religion, but when you call out their religion, or when you quote their own religion about what happens, they immediately shift into it being an ethnicity. When you call it out for being an ethnicity, they shift it into a religion, and they play this some sort of like mental gymnastics. And you end up like very confused and trying to make sense into this at some sort, in which we talked about it, about the even if. A lot of people will be, and it's mentioned in Muhammad Qurt book, well, even if. Yes, it's done from the position of, even if there was like tunnels, even if they did these alleged claims, that doesn't justify killing civilians. That doesn't justify killing children. That doesn't justify wiping out full neighborhoods. Yes, but even if goes to us, the Palestinians as well. And I believe he talks about it to the Palestinians as well, because even if is mentioned within us in a different light, because of what we have been like, with this point of being like cornered into for so long into defending your existence, to the point that they say like Palestinians are internalized, they have the internalized idea, or they are conditioned into believing that they are truly subhuman, and they are truly very lucky if they had the opportunity, if they had the chance, if they had a little bit of like the bread crumbling of this world, in which they throw their scraps and crumbs, and they have to be thankful for it, or else they will get nothing. And that's a very dangerous position to be put on in the first place, and very harmful for our cause, and very beneficial to theirs.
Yeah, absolutely. The psychology of colonialism is very very insidious, and I mean you see that here too, obviously not to the same extreme extent, but you see that here with people that idolize the boots on their necks and are very happy for their very bad jobs and their lack of affordable housing and healthcare and well, at least I have a job, or I'm American, so at least I'm free, whatever the hell that means in the context of not being able to feed yourself and your family. But it seems like a common psychological issue that gets beaten into people from here to Palestine. And I I wanted to talk about another thing with that, because if somebody asks me, what about October 7th, I say, what about everything since even before 1948, as you pointed out, because the British were not exactly kind landlords, if you'd like to call them that. Um, so what about the trope of mowing the grass, which is literally what Israel called it when they would carpet bomb Gaza to, as they put it, to keep the birth rate down. And this is a very colonialist tactic. This is something that we saw happen in Australia and Africa, in North America, what indigenous folks call Turtle Island. This is a tactic that's been, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So the idea that you could stop a conversation or set up the hurdle with October 7th is a non-starter if you really understand history and if you really understand the trick that's trying to be played on you. And recently on the show, we had Kamau Franklin, who talked about how white rage and military rage in the name of U.S. empire or in the name of Israeli colonialism is always okay. Um, because it's better than, it's not savage, it's a civilized rage. But if it's rage in a black body or an indigenous body or a brown body, or rage that's directed towards the state, it's savage, it's crazy, it's terroristic, it's totally unwarranted. And of course, this is like incredibly amplified when we look at Palestine. And so the question is like, why is it? Why is it that Palestinian rage, this understandable rage at being genocided, is somehow more dangerous than the Israeli genocidal violence?
Well, adding to your point, just a small like adjustment. When someone asks you, what about the 7th? I prefer to reply, yes, what about it? Let's talk about it. If you want to talk about any point in history, any date or any day of the calendar when it comes to Palestine, let's talk about it. We're not afraid of the history. We're not afraid of the truth. We will discuss it as long as it's based on mutual respect and mutual understanding. And we put our egos to the side. We put our feelings, although our feelings are very important in that situation, but we will, like, for the sake of having a mutual ground, we can put our egos aside and our feelings aside, and let's discuss facts. Let's bring facts, let's bring testimonies, let's bring footage to the ground, and let's talk about it. And the first thing that comes into mind, what happened to Pepe and her children. And there is a 7 minute or 6 minute long video about her that's very clear, with audio, with footage about what happened to her. She was very scared from the bombings. She was very scared being surrounded by Palestinians all of the sudden. Was very scared being like put into that situation. Just imagine waking up, because it was very early in the morning. Just imagine waking up and having these foreigners speaking a foreign language. There's bombs and there's helicopters and there's tanks all over the place. So obviously she was very scared. Yes. But what was in the audio is people, Palestinian people, getting a blanket, covering her up, because it's in our culture to cover a woman, like a woman, showing her shoulder or showing her skin, to cover her up. They gave her her children, and in the video you see a Palestinian holding these blankets and like tightening them around her, and like here you go, and there are your children, like you are safe. And he is telling her in Arabic. Obviously he cannot speak Hebrew or English, but he's telling her very clearly that you are safe. You have your kids, we have kids too. You are human, we are human. I, and he's telling his fellow members, protect her, surround her, take her to safety, because we are humans. Let's show her true humanity. And to see people like this trying to prove to them that they are human. We were trying, like these people were trying to tell her and to tell the world, and the person who was recording was trying to show the world, because we understand what will be coming upon us afterwards. We are very aware of that. So they were trying to show the world that they are human, to show the world some evidence of their innocence, or evidence that they are trying to survive in this difficult situation that they had no choice over. And unfortunately, she died, and even her death was very exploited to the max. And you see the hypocrisy and you see the bigotry in people who are calling out her death or calling for her death as an unjust death, which is unjust. But they are very negligent of the hundreds of thousands who suffer the same fate as her. And they are just pushed aside into just too chill. Imagine, let's hypothetically imagine if we were to do the same thing that was done to Pepe and her children, to every child and every mother who had went through the same thing on the other side. We will not be done. We will not be done for years. So that's a topic that, yes, we like briefly going over, like, if you want to discuss the seven, let's discuss the seven. Let's discuss the article or the documentary or even the interviews done with people who were there from the Israeli side by Israeli media, who called out the drones, who called out the helicopters, who called out the tanks that blew up everything. Because when you see the damage and when you see the destruction, we are not capable of that. Our side is not capable of doing all this destruction in minutes. We've seen the footage. We've seen them coming in with wind gliders and some sort of like, yes, they had weapons, but they didn't have weaponry or artillery to like do that scale of damage.
Yeah, and there's an Israeli tank operator who literally admits to shooting up an entire kibbutz just because she was told to open fire. So it's like you have members of the Israeli military being like, yeah, we just shot a bunch of people and I have no idea who we killed, but we killed a lot of people. And you're like, yeah, so you killed a lot of Israelis. Then that's the thing that you did. So
So yes, if you want, like, what about the Senate? Yes, what about the Senate? Let's talk about it. Let's bring it on from your own words and from your own media and your own like people. But sorry for sidetracking about the situation. But when it comes to why rage from both sides is different, it's because both sides are held on a different type of scale. Like they scale differently when it comes to the weight of their voice or weight of their quote-unquote value, which, as we stated, like what happened to the Bebe and, for example, Samah, which is like a relative of mine, mother, who had been killed along with her children as well and her husband. She's the mother of Tamtam, which you know about. We have talked about it. So why are they even like held in different scales? Are we truly about humanity and about equity and about equality? I don't think so. And the reason for that is that not because they care about them, not because they hold different value, or not because they are actually bitter, but it's because their like situation benefits those in power and benefits their plans and benefits their agenda. So they exploit it and they shed crocodile tears for it, or they virtue signal a lot, or they try to gaslight the world into like falling into such plans. So, and we see it very vividly happening all over the world, as you said. Um, but yeah, when someone's like anger, or when someone's feelings, or when someone's voice, or when someone's story contradicts their agenda or contradicts their plans or contradicts their benefit, it's no longer valid. But how we can do it in a way, that's their question, or that's their way. How we can do it in a way that doesn't show us as hypocrites, that doesn't show us as bigots. So let's find a way to twist it, or let's find a way to manipulate it, or alter it, or like paint it in a light that doesn't make people fall into, or like try to call us out for it. So let's attach this. Oh, they are barbarics. They are uncivilized. They are uneducated. They hate us. They want us killed. They want us pushed away. And like some sort of, it goes to the absurdity of just claiming the freedom of certain people is considered an attack on another people. Like when you say, we've seen it in America when it comes to Black Lives Matters movement. As controversial as it is, there are a lot of things. I'm very aware that there are a lot of controversy around it and how it was carried out. But at the same time, when someone's like chants Black Lives Matter, you have like the white folks or the other folks coming in and like, all life matters. Okay, we understand all lives matters. We understand, but we are about this condition. And when we say like free Palestine, they'll be like, yes, free Israel too. Pray for Palestine. No, pray for Israel too. And we're like, okay, we are not in a race, or we are not competing who's the most oppressed or who's the most marginalized, or who's the most put down minority in this world. We're not competing to that. We're trying to uplift, and we're trying to equate everybody into this whole society of being a unit. But they don't want us to be aware of that. They want us to stay segregated and to stay separated. And unfortunately, we see a lot of like the social justice warrior movements falling into that trap, or being cornered into that trap, to the point that they themselves started being exclusive rather than inclusive. They started being divisive rather than uniting of the societies. And yeah, their anger is very frustration driven, and comes from the unheard, unnoticed place, and being like surrounded with this check of being called, like when you try to ask for your like rights or justice for people who wronged you, and you are being attacked, so you are trying to defend, and at the end you go into this lash out. And it's a very, very known concept in psychology called reactive abuse, in which someone with an abuser, typically a narcissist, will continuously push you down and abuse you and hurt you and gaslight you, to the point that you cannot hold it anymore. So you lash out, and you go into anger, and you go into a meltdown, or you go into a burst tantrum. And when you do so, they themselves will be the most calm and the most demure and the most like sensible person on the earth. And they will tell everybody like, look, they are the angry one. They are the crazy one. And this even puts you in a very like, in an even dark place. It's like you are in the rock bottom, and they dig even more, and they throw you more into that, because you feel that even if you lash out, you are being like, it's reversed upon you, and you are being cornered even more and more, and being trapped even more and more. And it's very it's very dangerous to the victim, and very dangerous to the abused in that sense. And we say the social justice movement falling into that a lot, because unfortunately a lot of the bonds formed in that society or in these movements are trauma bonds rather than actual bonds. So when it comes to a trauma bond, yes, it's a very strong bond. It's some sort of a survival mechanism, yes, but it creates more vulnerability to the person. That yes, I was finally finding someone who understands my trauma, and now we are trying to like imagine someone being gaslit and being denied and being called like schizophrenic or something like this, or paranoid for calling out an oppressor, and they finally see someone, or they finally meet someone being like, yes, I hear you, I know what you feel. And so they become immediately very vulnerable towards them, and they trust them immensely, and they consider them their safe bubbles. We hear the term a lot, safe zones or safe spaces. And when it comes to that, whenever someone of these abusers or of these people comes in and confronts that safe space, you see these people lashing out in a very angry manner that paints that movement and paints that cause in a way that look at them. They are crazy. They are absurd. They are very violent. They are very hateful. No wonder society shuts them down. No wonder should society marginalize them. And and yes, that's why our rage is like, long story short, our rage is not as valid, quote unquote, as the other rage, because it doesn't go with their propaganda. It doesn't, it doesn't go with their agenda. It doesn't go with their benefit. It doesn't serve them in a way. And demonizing us and painting us in a light that makes us some sort of like violent, nonsense, uneducated, even strengthening the agenda and the position of their power. So, yes, we have to be very aware of that. And we have to understand that it doesn't happen just in oppressed societies, but all societies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think your experience with psychology is very helpful there. Because yeah, I agree. There is a lot there. The layers of human psychology, and it gets used and abused by the colonizer or by the oppressor, whatever the case may be. And we only have a little bit of time left, but I wanted to also ask, because we've talked about this before too, like how, the trying to humanize Palestinians and what that means and what that looks like, especially because humanizing them can be dangerous, because it oftentimes means that you make them pitiable. You make them, these pathetic victims who don't have rage, because that's not okay. Um, as Mohammed Al-Kurd puts it, to defang them. Palestinians have to show their worthiness to be humanized. And you've talked about this before, like they have to perform. We have to smile and say, everything's great here in my tent. I have a plant or whatever. As opposed to being considered full humans just because you're human. There's no need to perform. There's no need to be defanged. There's no need to act a certain way. And so the trouble in trying to humanize Palestinians in the context of the space that has dehumanized them can be very dangerous. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about like the danger of, oh, let's humanize these poor, helpless Palestinians.
So yes, in the book of Perfect Victims, I've read the quotes or the page that talks about that how humanizing Palestinians is harmful, and I agree with that, because the idea of humanizing is very linked with a healed, perfect human rather than a human. So they expect us to be like, when it comes to let's humanize these people, they expect us, as you said, to be this peaceful, fully healed, fully emotionally regulated, with high intelligence person that will not do wrong, that will not lash out, that will not uh, let the pressure get into them, that they will do anything under like immense pressure and they will succeed. These are the humans. their idea of, that's the general idea of being a human. And yes, we go back, I always go back to like a worldwide scale, because it's a worldwide problem. And it puts pressure on everybody in this world to be this perfect human, rather than just be human and experience life as it is, and don't judge others for their missteps, for their like for their step backs or for their fall downs, because you cannot judge someone from one chapter. You have to read the whole story. And once you read the whole story, you see the true human. You understand the true human. And for us to be these regulated, fully healed people, Palestinian people, we are back to our Palestinian like box, or Palestinian demographic, to be these healed people and fully regulated people that are very reasonable when they talk, that they work efficiently and they are calmly working. We have to have an environment that facilitates, and we don't have that. And it's very, very important to point out to the viewers and to the listeners in this program, for them to understand that the way they did it was very, very devious. In a way, they segregated even the Palestinians themselves, and they turned them against one another, because the Palestinian experience is different in Gaza than it is in the West Bank, than it is in diaspora, than it is in the land of 1948, quote unquote, Israel. It's completely different, to the point, and it's been going on for 3 generations now, 76 years, to the point that we no longer can, somehow, to a certain degree, we can no longer relate to one another, except if we put the active effort to communicate and to share one another. And it's very like brief history talking. It's in 1948, a lot of people been exiled from the land of 1948, which is the majority of Palestine, except Julan, West Bank, and Gaza. The Julan is like belongs to Syria, but like, you know, the map wasn't clear back then because the British mandate had drawn and all of this. So we have the people who stayed there in 1948, and they remain so, and they were seen as the Arabs of Israel, not as Palestinians, but Arabs of Israel, and they were given Israeli ID and Israeli citizenship, but not. It's very different than the Israeli citizenship of an Jewish Israeli. They are considered some sort of second-degree citizen. And they are cornered into some sort of neighborhood, some sort of situations, and some sort of jobs. And they are considered as a minority, in which they cannot hold certain positions within the government, but they have some seats at the council. But yeah. And we have the people of Gaza and the West Bank. People of the West Bank were under the control of Jordan, and people of Gaza were under the control of Egypt from 1948 up until 1967, after like the Israeli took over West Bank and Gaza. And they use this as a point of like, oh, Gazans are Egyptians and West Banks are Jordanians. See how they like muddy waters? And because it was separated, there has been different, completely different experiences on both sides. And we have people who left completely to the diaspora, that they were in 1993 at the Oslo Agreement, were denied being Palestinians, unfortunately by a Palestinian named Yasser Arafat, our first ever president and representative. And he essentially signed this agreement and gave up everybody who was in diaspora. We have 12 million Palestinians that they are not recognized in international law as Palestinians. And they are not even claimed by other countries they went through, mainly the countries in the Arabic region, like Gulf, like Jordan, like Lebanon, like Egypt, like Libya, Morocco. These Palestinians don't have citizenship in these countries. So they are not Palestinians, but they are not citizens to that land. They just hold travel documents, and it's called Watifat Safar, which marked as you are a Palestinian refugee, and here's travel documents from this land in which you can live, but because of the Oslo Agreement, you cannot go back to Palestine whatsoever unless you are approved by the IDF. So all these four main groups, and we have the people of Jerusalem. That's another story. People of the Jerusalem are the most oppressed, most most underrepresented, most under talked about. And I'm so glad that Muhammad Kurd is one of them, and he's voicing out his experience, and he voiced it out beautifully during Sheikh Jarrah protests and events in 2020. But because we have been segregated and separated completely from one another, we have completely different outlooks and completely different experience. For example, people in the land of 1948, they feel grateful that they have Israeli passports and they can travel abroad at least. They can live without being graded by bombs. Yes, they pay high taxes, but yeah, they are some sort of they have some sort of the living, and they can, at the same time, they cannot be vocal or they cannot call it out because, they will be persecuted heavily. If I will make some sort of similarities, parallel similarities with the US, they are the blacks of Israel. Yes, there are blacks of Israel who are being but you know what I'm trying to say? They are the people of color of Israel. They are citizens, but not citizens. And they have their own problems. And when they try to protest or talk about it, they are considered as this oppressed minority that trying to get, and that they whitewash it into, yes, we are giving them democracy. They can do so. And we have the people of the West Bank, in which they are fighting day and night the settler violence there. The way their food and their resources and their farms and their water wells are being taken over by the settlers and being turned off, and the way they are being separated from one another with settlements and with roads and with metal gates, checkpoints, that they are being crammed into atom, and they cannot be vocal because the Palestinian Authority there is coordinating and they are preventing them from speaking out because they have to, the Palestinian Authority is having this sort of agreement with the Israeli government that, yes, we will let you be and we will give you money and let you be in this small area of Ramallah and some sort of places. But if there is any sort of resistance from the Palestinian side, we will take you off. So this Palestinian Authority is very vicious against anyone who's vocal about resisting, who's vocal about calling out, who's vocal about protesting. So they have this experience. And then we have the people of Gaza, who in 2006, they have, quote unquote, withdrawn from Gaza to the borders of Gaza. It's very essential to talk about it, but they say it all the time. They have withdrawn from Gaza. No, they didn't give us freedom. They surrounded Gaza. They withdrawn from it and surrounded it, besieged it completely for over 18 years. So here in Gaza, people can be vocal. Resistance is somehow celebrated, justifiably so, because you are resisting an occupation. Whether I personally agree with the way they are resisting or the way this resistance is being represented or carried out, I don't agree with the majority of it, yes. But yes, we do have the right to resist. These people are being crammed into this enclosure of a prison that they cannot travel out and into. So essentially, they don't have any sort of communication with the outside world. Aside from the internet and the very few who went abroad with hideous tasks and hideous like paperwork to go outside. It takes like approximately 2 months to get approval to the border. It used to before this event. It used to get 2 months before approval. You would have to bribe to get your way out, and when you go back, you have to prepare beforehand for another process of waiting on the border, taking the approval, taking the necessary paperwork, clearing your name before entering into your own country back. So these 4 experiences that we are being experienced plays a certain role into how we try to humanize ourselves. And it's very different. So what happened with the Oscars recently with the No Other Land, in which you see a Palestinian feeling the need to put his hand in hand with an Israeli just to be seen and just to have a certain word. And even when they have that stage, they are not very vocal about it. And they are being exploited as a tool, but he's okay with it. Why is he okay with it? Because he thinks that he's lucky. He thinks that by this way, he shows the world that he's a human. He's the perfect human who would do like this peace gesture, and he shows that he can coexist, and he shows that there is some sort of reason into it. Although if you watch that documentary, it's very vivid how it's painting the Palestinians as these Gandhis. I would like to talk like call them that way. Like they paint Palestinians as these Gandhis. That they are just peaceful. They are trying to get back to their village, but they are being pushed away and pushed down. They did not do anything wrong, or they did not be angry at all, and they are very peaceful. No, this documentary doesn't show the full light. Yes, we have people who are violent within our society. Yes, we have people who are angry. Yes, we have people who cannot regulate their emotion. Yes, we have people who even have a false perception, a false understanding of what goes on. Yes, we do, because we are a society. We are a community, just like any other community and just like any other society in this world. That doesn't mean that our cause, that our story, that our whole like country or whole existence is reliant on a certain person's behavior. It's a collective thing. It's a society. It's a concept. So I don't agree with the way that this documentary was held. And yeah, if it was to be like shown or broadcasted to like a worldwide audience, I would suggest it would be broadcasted or viewed in a certain light to be studied, rather than to have like to listen to what's been done there. Because yes, listen to it, but let's talk about it. Let's discuss what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've heard similar things about this film, and I think that really goes into the what you've just talked about, is trying to make things very flat and flimsy and you know, monochrome, like, oh, the Palestinian experience is this and the Palestinian person is this, and make it easy and also make it comfortable for so-called Western audiences, which of course is part of this.
And
Like,
let's
comfort has to be.
well, I forget. Sorry for interrupting you.
No,
Before
you're
I
fine.
forget, when it comes to like the acceptance speech, it's very not noticeable how if you like watch it back again and notice how the Palestinian is talking about, oh, I just had a daughter and I want her to live in peace, and I don't want you to kick us out or ethnically cleanse our people. And just this, they don't hold a certain side accountable. They don't hold a certain side as the one to blame. While on the other side, you see the Israeli coming in and he's mentioning the seventh. He's mentioning that it's the reason why it started everything. He's mentioning that, yes, the destruction is not acceptable there, but let's free the hostages again with the same. And he said a line that was very like it made me like be like, "Hmm, Wait there. When he said, my people will be safe when their people are free, he's insinuating that we are the violent ones, that we are the ones who are making them unsafe. And he insinuating that their freedom is to leave them in whatever like corner of land has been left, but we're not gonna withdraw the settlements. He's calling out the expansion of the settlements, not the removal of the settlements. So it's very vivid that this whole fiasco and this whole like stage performance that was there is very harmful to us rather than it's useful to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that's a very powerful note to end on, because I think that this is something that we really need to consider. Like, is the thing that we're sharing, the thing that we're saying about Palestine, is it actually helpful to Palestinians, or is it harmful? And in that, like, does it make you feel good about yourself, or is it actually helpful? And I think that's something that people need to ask themselves a lot more. Khalil, thank you so much for taking the time. I feel like I've taken a lot of your time. But thank you so much for sitting down to speak with us again.
Thank you for having me. Always a pleasure.